The killer app for mouse controls is almost here, and similar to ARMS, it's a rare but welcome example of Nintendo making a new IP to better showcase its console's gimmick. Over the weekend, there was a playtest just before the game comes out on Thursday, and it basically gave us access to the title as a whole. So in this video, let's analyze Drag and Drive to find out if it has that winning formula and to see if its concept will stick by becoming relevant and successful long after the game is released. Now, by far the most defining trait of this game is how it utilizes its controls. I've always been very intrigued about how the Switch 2 goes about implementing its mouse controls into its games. So this was the aspect I found most interesting about Drag and Drive. For starters, you really don't need some crazy setup or anything to play this. In fact, I found it plays best and at its most comfortable when sat down using your trouser leg. Of course, the actual surface of the trousers themselves do matter. I personally recommend some kind of jeans, preferably skinny jeans over anything baggy. I did recently make an in-depth video talking about the mouse controls on the Switch 2. And personally, through my findings, I did find that the surface itself really does matter when it comes to how responsive the mouse controls feel when using the Joy-Con 2s. Anyway, moving back to Drag and Drive, everything is surprisingly responsive. It just kinda feels natural, like you're actually in a wheelchair, which sounds really strange to say at first. For instance, performing maneuvers such as 180s by moving one arm forward and one arm backwards doesn't really need to be explained since it's already something you do in real life when using a wheelchair. I'm really impressed at just how well Nintendo nailed the level of immersion you feel with this control scheme. I kinda hope at some point in the future the game incorporates some kind of VR support, as I almost feel like it's made for it with this control layout. Okay, I've really gushed about the controls so far, but it really has to be felt to be believed. It's hard to communicate in a video until you actually use them yourself. I think this game is best played on the jean leg in all honesty. You don't have to worry about the size of your surface since your leg is good enough to scoot the wheels to their maximum speed. It also just better complements the Switch 2's form factor, since for the most part during the playtest I was playing it in tabletop mode using my trouser leg. Sure, I looked ridiculous to a lot of outsiders, but I was having so much fun that I didn't really care. The only thing I will say about this control scheme is that your level of comfort will vary based on your setup. For instance, I started to get arm ache at the end of each playtest, so about 2 to 3 hours of playtime ended up leading me to get arm ache, which isn't too bad in all honesty. As someone who's played a lot of fighting games, it really reminded me of using a fight stick for the first time, or even a guitar like a musical instrument. The first few times that you use them, you do feel a lot of ache in your arms and joints. But after a while of getting used to it, I'm sure most people will build up a resistance to this control scheme and not feel as achy after using it. Okay, let's take a step back from the controls for a moment and talk about Drag and Drive itself. It's fun, and I mean really fun. Matches go by pretty quickly, but for the most part you're a 3 versus 3 or sometimes a 2 versus 2 going against each other to score points. Now, the game is still in its early days, but during my time with the playtest I did notice a lot of players performing the gestures wrong. But that's definitely just a skill curve thing. I'm sure most people will get used to it over time. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I did struggle to do some of these gestures myself, so when I got to the hoop and went to score a goal, sometimes I just missed miserably, which can be pretty embarrassing during a match, but hey, it's part of the fun. I don't want to make obvious comparisons, but it is very similar to Rocket League in how it's a constant back and forth to get points. But more unique to Drag and Drive is how you can actually perform stylish stunts to add a modifier to your score, giving you more points. I really enjoyed this mechanic since it led to more creativity and player expression when it came to actually scoring instead of just getting from point A to point B being the hoop. It's a small mechanic, but it really goes a long way in changing how you play the game as a whole. I feel like if Drag and Drive didn't have this central design at the forefront, a lot of the matches will feel the exact same since it will just equate to you scoring points and not really thinking about it all that much. The actual matches themselves are actually pretty good in terms of length, although I did feel like there wasn't much synergy when playing with random players online. Not many people would pass most of the times and kinda just Hail Mary their own strats. Which was kinda cringe to see, like this is a team-based game, you don't just play it by yourself. A lot of players were also just mindlessly bashing into one another, which I'm sure is once again a skill curve issue. When they have more time with the game they'll get better at it. But yeah, I'm actually really impressed at the level of depth in Drag and Drive. It's not as mindless as you might think at first, and actually requires a lot of effort to pull off these stunts. I'm looking forward to seeing the eventual esports scene for Drag and Drive and really hope it has some healthy competitive roots, since I feel like esports in general has become kinda stagnant and boring, seeing the same games played every year in the competitive scene. So this is kinda the mix up and shift that I've been waiting for a while now. On the topic of competitive Drag and Drive, I really think this game has a lot of potential when it comes to this. It's even fun to try hard, even on a casual level when first picking up the game. I mean, I was constantly going for those stylish points whenever I could, even if it ended up with me failing miserably.
Nice.
I'm not sure how mainstream Drag and Drive will become on a competitive level, but I can definitely see Nintendo supporting it, similar to what they did with Smash Ultimate and Splatoon when they ran their own tournaments for those games. Speaking of playing this game competitively, I'm really curious on how each of the characters' weight classes will factor in a team environment. The lightweight specialises in moving around really fast but has a hard time scoring, whereas the medium weight is your jack of all trades character that specialises in nothing but is pretty decent all around. And as you can tell, the heavyweight is really good at tackling and scoring from afar. As you can see in this footage, I really enjoy using the lightweight. They're really good at slam dunking from afar, and once they get the ball they're pretty much gone, they can go so fast. Seriously, I was frantically moving the Joy-Con 2s up and down my legs so fast I swear I was conducting some kind of static electricity. I didn't spend much time with the mid and heavyweights, but the game seems really well balanced around them. No character really felt like they had a huge advantage over one another. In a team setting, I can really see this adding a decent amount of variety, with each class complementing each player's playstyle. Hopefully in the final game this doesn't amount in some kind of meta build where most people just use one sole weight class because it's better than the others. Also, quick rant, but I really can't stand people who just rely on meta picks such as the Waluigi Wiggler combo back in Mario Kart 8. Like guys, just play the game to have fun, stop relying on meta picks, it's really cringe. Anyway, small rant aside, Drag and Drive is amazing, but I do feel like it could be better. I have some small criticisms that I do hope get patched and changed in the final build. For starters, my biggest complaint about Drag and Drive is that I hate the player lobby system in this game. So basically, you're constantly in a public lobby and it's comprised of 2 sets of 12 players. So 6 players are on one side of the court and 6 players are on the other side of the court, constantly alternating between matches. This doesn't sound too bad at first since it is a great way of getting into a game non-stop. But it's not until you approach this game with the mindset of someone who wants to play matches with friends against randos where things truly start to get terrible. So Drag and Drive literally has the same problem as Mario Kart World does. Basically, back in Mario Kart 8 when things were perfect, when you saw your friend in a public match, you could easily join them by looking at your friends list. But for some reason, ever since Mario Kart World, Nintendo's been really bad at letting you play with your friends when going into an online game. There are just so many hurdles and hoops that you have to jump through when it comes to wanting to play with your friends in a public setting. It's hard to communicate the frustrations unless you've actually gone through it, but in all honesty, it really shouldn't be this hard to just play with your friends in a public room. Sure, you're probably thinking, well, just make a friend lobby, fair enough, but if you only have say 3 friends, then you're stuck with playing against just bots. The most ideal solution, and what I hope is in the final build of the game, is some kind of competitive mode similar to Splatoon's Squad Strike mode. Basically in that game, it allowed you to queue into a room with 3 friends as a free stack and go against other people who was also playing as a free stack. But by far, the biggest issue with the public lobby system in Drag and Drive is that if you somehow manage to perform the Herculean task of having all of your friends in a public lobby, even then you're not guaranteed to actually play with them or against them. This is since there's 2 courts going about at all times, and I swear during my time the RNG or something must have been against me, cause every single time I'd be against my friends it pretty much would put them into the other court. So even though we was in the same lobby, we wasn't actually playing together or against each other because the game constantly put the other player into the other court. Like I said, it's a great system if you're playing against randos and just want to get into a quick match, but as someone who wants to play with their friends it's really frustrating. Granted, this is still a playtest, so issues and concepts should be patched and further improved over time, but I don't think it will be too different from the final build since the game's only out in a few days. I just really hope that the final game has a competitive, casual and friend stack system. In all honesty, I just want to play with my friends against random players online. I really hate having to rely on an RNG matchmaking system to allow me to even do this in the first place. But that's it, that's my only complaint when it comes to Drag and Drive. The rest of the game is actually phenomenal. Speaking of that price point, for £17 or $20, I really think this game is worth it. Sure, you might not go through the game in just one sitting, but over time I'm sure the investment will be worth it. It's more like something like Street Fighter or Mario Kart where you'll slowly play small sessions over time. I'm not sure how well it will do as a party game since it's only 2-player split screen, but I feel like it will be a great way to have other people see the game and maybe even play it for themselves. It's just such a bizarre and out there concept that I'm sure in a public setting it will get people intrigued to look at it alone. So even as something to just talk about or a weird side gimmick to play during a party setting, I'm sure it's great for that alone. But that begs the question and the topic of this video, do I think Drag and Drive will be successful? Yeah. History can be a strange thing. A lot of Nintendo historians or people online tend to write games off like ARMS as being a failure, despite the fact that it sold over 1 million copies for a new IP and had a decent amount of post-game support. I think Drag and Drive will have a similar fate, but unlike ARMS where the concept didn't stick and most people including myself only played that game as a fighter until Smash Ultimate dethroned it as the premier fighting game on the Switch, I feel like Drag and Drive won't suffer that same fate since its concept feels more simple and realised when compared to ARMS. The closest it comes to as a game is something like Rocket League meets Katamari meets wheelchair basketball, and that comparison is a bit of a stretch. Even at the very least, I can easily see it selling over 1 million copies, especially with its more attractive price tag when compared to ARMS. It's kind of wild in retrospect how something like 1-2-Switch sold for the same price as Breath of the Wild back in the day, but now we're seeing an era where at least there's some awareness when it comes to how much Drag and Drive is worth. For £17 or $20, I'd say it's well worth it. And hey, if you're like me and someone who is just absolutely obsessed with the mouse controls on the Switch too, it's worth it for that alone. I'm sorry Bravely Default, Ring a Bell Skycruise, you've been dethroned as the de facto Switch 2 mouse control experience. I now crown thee Drag and Drive as the de facto mouse control experience on the Switch 2. But hey, we don't know what the future holds, maybe they'll make another game that uses the mouse controls in a weird and interesting way. But with all that being said, now I'm curious, what did you think about Drag and Drive as a whole? Feel free to let me know in the comments section. Also, any feedback on this video would be appreciated. Thank you so much for watching and I hope you have a nice rest of your day.